What's up, and welcome to another video from Kitty Clinical, your source for the best advice or top advice from a skilled physician on how to get into medical school, the process of becoming a doctor, etc., etc. So today we're going to be talking about the topic of the GPA that gets you into medical school. You are an undergraduate applicant you're an undergraduate. You're a medical school applicant. You're applying to medical school, and you're going to graduate soon, and you're looking at improving your GPA. So what are you going to do? Well, there's a few things you should know about. I'm going to talk about one of them in this video today, and that is going to be about the applicant's GPA being a requirement, a threshold. So What do I mean by this? Well, if you go back to one of my previous videos where I talk about the hidden threshold, quote unquote, for your MCAT score, which we discussed was a competitive score was considered around 511, give or take, which ironically a 509, according to MedEdits.com, is considered not competitive. So if you get a 511, that's considered good, I guess. Well, you know what? When I was getting into medical school, the MCAT was scored out of 45, so it was a little bit different from the way things are now, because I'm one of the old timers out there. But we're looking at the GPA, and it's the same thing. These medical school admissions, they have a cutoff, just like they do for the MCAT for the GPA. So what does that mean for you? That means you just have to do as well as possible on the GPA, folks. And as you know, there's three categories that the AMCAS looks at: the overall GPA, the BCPM GPA, which stands for biology, chemistry, physics, and math, and the non-science GPA. So you got to do well on all three of these categories, but I also want to drive home the point that you have to keep in mind these schools are going to be screening you out. So what that means is you're going to be applying to these schools. You're going to be paying the medical college admissions fee, which I don't know what it is now off the top of my head, but you're going to be paying money to apply to these schools, and they're going to shut you down. They're not even going to see your application because your GPA wasn't high enough. Okay, that's essentially what I'm saying here, and unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles. But it is the way that the medical school admissions system works. So those people who tell you do well on your MCAT, do well in school, but don't forget to also focus on extracurriculars, I'm here to tell you, triage. Figure out what's important, figure out what's not as important. Okay, so maybe getting that 10th paper published is not as important as getting a good score on the MCAT, getting a good GPA. Do not let your GPA suffer for the sake of other things that are not as important. So GPA is going to be important. Like I said, in my opinion, I think the MCAT is more important because the MCAT, unlike the GPA, is standardized. But the MCAT is important. The GPA is also important. In my mind, GPA is number 2, MCAT number 1, but I still think the GPA is still just as important in many ways, because there's a lot of things that the MCAT score does not tell you about an applicant. The GPA tells the MCAT tells you how they did in one calendar day. It tells you how did Sam do on August 24th of 2000 whatever. The GPA tells you how Sam did over the course of 4 years of college, right? So think to yourself. In my mind, I still think the MCAT is probably number 1, but a lot of people will disagree with me. The GPA is important too, and I don't want you to think that the GPA is not any less important than the MCAT. I think they're both, for all intents and purposes, I would say treat them as both equally important. For me, it's like MCAT 50.5%, GPA 49.5%. It's that close. Okay? So think to yourself, GPA is important. Figure out what's important to do well on your GPA. Do you need to get a better BCPM GPA, or do you need to improve your non-science GPA? Focus on allotting time on those courses that you need to do well on, because time is money, time is effort. Time, it's almost like a formula, right? Time equals doing well on your score. If you study, you will do well on the exam. That is a tried and true method. That is something that may freak people out. Maybe it's a big surprise to people, but it is true. It's been studied that if you study for an exam and you take the exam, if you studied for it, you will do well. And depending on how much time, the more you study for it, the better you will do well. Not just for the MCAT, but also for your college exams. So focus on those finals. Don't sit on your midterms. But just know that there's a cutoff that the medical schools have for what they want to see. But there's a big but, and we'll talk about it. We'll focus more on this in a future video. Once you get through that threshold, what now? All right, see you later.